Guys, um, first of all, I'm wondering how did the team season and like last semester, how did that operate?
Last, like in the fall.
Yeah.
Um, to be honest, for track and field, it was pretty typical as far as like our start date for practice and things. The major differences were just being in smaller groups as far as how we practice instead of being in a large group. Obviously, with our team, between our men and our women's team, we're somewhere between 120 to 170 people, depending on the year. So, when we're only in groups of 10 to 15 people at a time max, then it's a little different. So we just never have really been together as an entire team, but for practices and things like that, it's been somewhat normal, other than wearing masks every day to practice too.
Mhm. And did they allow competition or no?
We will have our first actual competition this Saturday. So that will be the first time we will have competed this year.
Okay. Um, so in terms of last season, what sort of challenges did the team face compared to what you might be facing now?
Well, I think now that you look back on it, we didn't have hardly any challenges last year until we got shut down. Um,
Mhm.
you know, Once we were shut down, the challenge became, how do we come back? How do we stay active until we come back? So, that was a tough transition. To be honest, like I don't know how much we were doing a lot in the spring as far as a whole group. Once we got shut down, until we got back here in the fall, was probably the first time we were really, really well organized again.
Mhm.
So, losing that entire outdoor season last year, put us behind. I mean, for sure coming into this year, because our athletes, at least that were returners, at least got an indoor season, but every freshman that we had come in had no high school season at all. So the last time some of them had really practiced had been their junior year of high school. So that was, I think, a tough transition, because we didn't really know what we were getting with our incoming freshman class. And I don't know if they really know what to expect coming in either of themselves. So I think I've seen that more in that group than any other group, is that the freshmen are probably a little more behind than a normal freshman class is right now, just based on the fact that they lost an entire season.
Yeah. So during that time of shutdown, like how were you or were you even able to like keep athletes accountable, engaged, continuing to stay active?
I would say we were sending things for them to do, but I wasn't doing a lot of checking on them to make at that point, just trying to sift through some things and knowing that we weren't going to be back for the season. Um, we were more dealing with just getting through day-to-day stuff than we were, worrying about how intense our workouts were or anything like that. It was more, here's something to do if you have a place to do it. That was another issue. A lot of places, everybody was back wherever they grew up. Most of them, a few people were still here, but some places you weren't allowed on a track. If it was your high school track, they weren't even allowing people on tracks. You'd get in trouble
Yeah.
depending on where you were in the state or which state. So, that was the least of my worries, to be honest. At that time, wasn't really how much we were doing. It was great for those that could, but at that time I was just trying to make sure everybody was you know mentally still with it and trying to
Right.
get through their classes.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, and what adjustments to practices and meets are expected in order to like keep competition possible this year?
um we haven't tried to adjust a lot for practices, other than we've spread out how much time we're taking at practice, meaning different groups are reporting at different times so that we're not all in the building at the same time, which, is different for us. Usually we see everybody every day at the same time. So a little more spread out that way. And obviously we're wearing masks at practices every day. Now that we get into, competition, it's only dual meets within our conference to start. So the first 4 weeks here, it will just be duals, which is very unusual for us. Most meets that we would go to in the past have been, 8 to 12 teams at a meet, and we're there all day. So that's a little different. Obviously, we're taking temperatures every time we show up to practice, every time we have to travel, just making sure that all our kids are testing every Friday, so that we're testing within a 24-hour period of when we're traveling will be a new thing this week. Because before we could just test once a week whenever we wanted. So we're all trying to get in on the same day. So logistically, there's a lot more paperwork involved. But as far as and Megan can talk about this a little more, I think as far as an athlete, it's more of signing up to use the weight room instead of just walking in the weight room, making sure that you're showing up to your practice times on time. But as far as the practice and the meets itself, hopefully those don't look a ton different. I'm not sure what the meets are going to look like because we haven't had one yet, but I'm hoping practices to me have felt like at least they're somewhat similar.
Okay. Yeah. And what has COVID sort of taught you about coaching in the world of sports?
Well, it's taught me that I really like what I do, because when it got taken away, it was pretty rough. I think they talk about the kids, what their mental state was. Mine was horrible in April and May. I was a little bit depressed because I wasn't able to do the job that I actually love. And I knew I liked my job before, but it reinforced how much I really love my job. Mm-hmm. I think it's also given some perspective to how unimportant sports are, but how important they are at the same time. Meaning, the world goes on if we're not having practice and we're not competing at a Division III level, the world's going to go on without us. But at the same time, you realize how important that piece of the day is to most of the, athletes on our team, and how that's a big part of their life. And when it's taken away, that they don't have something to fill it yet with, a lot of them weren't ready to give that up yet. So you expect that when they leave and they graduate. And to be honest, I think there's kids that struggle with that transition when they don't have sports anymore. But you kind of know when it's coming, but when it's just taken away like that. And I think it's no different than if somebody has a career-ending injury, there's a process to that. And, I think it's taught us that, yeah, you want it to have a place in your world, but, to also know what that place is.
Mm-hmm. So what was your reaction and the rest of the team when you were allowed to come back?
It's been weird because it's been a slow trickle as far as what you find out, what you're going to do. So I don't know if there was ever a really big reaction to, yes, we're back, or anything like that. Probably the biggest one was when we found out that we were actually going to have meets indoor. The mood of the team went from, we're just practicing and hoping, to finally finding out that we're actually going to have meets. That was pretty big. It changed how I think practice was going to a certain extent. You went from just being there to have something to do, and because this is what you do, to having a purpose behind what you're doing again. Mm-hmm. But everything up to that point had been this slow trickle of and it still is to a certain degree, of what's going on. This is a different week, because it seems like things change with COVID every week or every 2 weeks, and it changes our perspective too. So it's never been this yay, hurrah moment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Coach. I don't have any more questions for you, but I do for me. So Megan, how did you feel about not being able to compete for so long?
Yeah, I mean, It was definitely rough, having our season just abruptly end. And it was definitely hard to train during the summer and not really knowing what the future holds, what this upcoming season was going to look like. Thankfully now we have a season though, but kind of like Chip said, it was hard to practice and train, not knowing, not really having a purpose behind things.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, and how do you feel now about sort of going in to compete again during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be different, wearing masks and whatnot, but I'm definitely super excited, and I know the team is excited to finally compete and get back to work and show what we've been putting in this off season.
Mhm. And can you like talk a little bit about, how close the team was before COVID, and I guess like how maybe the team does it feel fractured now because you guys are kind of like a little bit separated into groups?
Um, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say we're too separated. Obviously, everybody keeps in touch, even though that we might still be in different event groups and practicing at different times. It seems like everybody has friends and knows teammates in other groups, so you're checking in on each other, and obviously everybody's going through the same thing at the same time. So it's just keeping an eye on each other, and we're obviously all fighting for one goal, win a national championship at the end. So we're making sure that we're sticking together and keeping an eye on each other.
Okay. And is track, is it fulfilling enough on its own just with practices, or do you really feel like there needs to be like competition and things like that?
I mean, it's great to go out on a run every single day, but to have the weekends to compete and show what you've been working towards is even better. And to go out there and get a PR or do something that you've just never done before. I mean, that's what we work towards.
Mhm. Absolutely. And how prepared do you feel now compared to if this was like just a normal season?
Um, I'd say definitely feel prepared. I think having our season shut down last year, it made people open their eyes and realize that, okay, this could happen at any time. So I think people, I would say, especially myself, definitely going into practice and just doing everything's not just track, but everything in life, you kind of take a different perspective and you go into it not knowing when that last day could be that you do that, whatever that is, track, school, just anything in life. So I think it's just, giving ourselves more of a drive to really do things. So yeah, I think others feel prepared for this season.
Okay. And how do you feel the coaches have sort of supported the team through this period?
Yeah, I think the coaches have done a great job. Um, each coach in their event group checking in on each other, not only making sure that we're training and doing everything correctly, but also to make sure that our mental state is, in the right area, and also that academically that we're doing well, obviously with classes moving online. That's been a big adjustment for a lot of people. So they've done a great job checking in on us in all aspects of life and track.
Okay, great. Well, I have no further questions. Thank you.